You've been hearing us talk about imperial yeast for a while now, and that's because we absolutely love the stuff. With 200 billion cells in each pitch-right pouch, we rarely need to make starters these days. While originally based out of Portland, Oregon, imperial yeast has expanded to the East Coast, meaning even more people have access to their incredible lineup of yeast, including popular strains like A07 Flagship, A38 Juice, A09 Pub, and a Brülosophy favorite, L17 Harvest. So good. Whether you brew at home or on the commercial scale, imperial yeast has what you need to make the best beer possible. You can check out all of their available strains and start your planning at imperialyeast.com. Human beings have been finding ways to catch a buzz for thousands of years, whether it be from spontaneously fermented fruit juices, distilled spirits, or intentionally produced beer. Regardless of the type of alcohol or even the reasons for its use, one thing pretty much everyone who enjoys imbibing from time to time has experienced is the nowhere near as fun after effects. You're listening to the Brülosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and this week I'm joined by contributor Will Lovell to talk about our experiences not only attempting to avoid, but also dealing with the dreaded hangover.
Well, by some strange coincidence, or maybe unfortunate coincidence, I happen to be someone that's experienced quite a few of these. So maybe I'm uniquely qualified to talk about what works for me or doesn't work for me from unfortunate experiences that I've had. Thanks, Marshall.
You and me both, my friend. Now, look, I understand that some people view hangovers as some sort of a sign of a person's inability to appropriately regulate their drinking or whatever. I'm not one of those people. While I would never encourage gross irresponsibility, I just view hangovers as being part and parcel of being involved in brewing and beer. Now, I'm not saying that I'm regularly hungover. That's actually quite far from the truth for some weird reason, but I simply accept that there are going to be times where I tie one on and the consequences of that decision may end up being, a few hours of feeling like shit the next day. So our point in this episode is to discuss our experiences trying to reduce the chances of a hangover as well as dealing with them by doing certain fun little things that we think have worked, as well as talking about things that we've done that haven't worked. And I imagine we're going to be sharing some of our own hangover highlights as well, which, that could be pretty interesting. So, all right, if you're a fan of this show and you'd like to receive a reward for your support, please consider becoming a patron of Brülosophy over at patreon.com/Brülosophy, where you make a small pledge and receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. Coming up later this month, June of 2024, one of the Brew Club's founding members, Haven Schultz, is going to be hanging out with patrons. Understandably, people tend to think myself and the other contributors are fully behind the Brew Club, but that's not quite true. While some of the crew help out with it, they're really kind of their own thing, which we think is pretty rad. And Haven's a big part of the reason for the Brew Club's success. If you have any questions about the Brew Club or just homebrewing in general and want to be a part of this session, be sure to make your pledge of just $3 or more by Friday, June 28th, 2024, as Haven's going to be taking questions on Saturday, the 29th. All past sessions are stored on our private Facebook and Patreon pages, so you can go back and watch them whenever you like. Again, that's patreon.com/Brülosophy. Another really easy way to help us out is by using the links found at brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience won't change at all, and we get a little bit of a commission for that referral. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've brewed on both their 120 and 240-volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit, efficient, easy to use with a relatively small footprint. You will not be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the dudes behind the company run an amazing YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer over at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know Brülosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Phil LaFleur wrote in with some feedback after listening to episode 333, where our focus was on brewing with brown sugar and Belgian candy syrup. Phil said, "You talked about how some people say that using sugar in a beer will make it taste cidery. This is not a myth. I started brewing beer in 1979. I got a beer recipe from a 95-cent pamphlet titled An Essay on Brewing, Vintage, and Distillation, together with selected remedies for hangover melancholia, or how to make booze. The book's recipe was a 3-pound can of Blue Ribbon unopened pre-hopped liquid malt extract, or LME, purchased from the grocery store, mixed with 5 pounds of sugar in 7 gallons of water. All my batches had this, quote, cidery taste that I just associated with homebrewed beer. As time progressed, better LME became available, but the cidery taste was always there when I used this standard recipe. I've always believed that the issue was the ratio of the sugar to malt. It was 62% sugar, and the fact that I used beet sugar. The, quote, cidery homebrew flavor was a real thing when I first started brewing. What do you think, Will?
So there's two things here. One, he's using liquid malt extract, which I don't know if I get a cidery character from, but oxidized liquid malt extract does impart a unique flavor that you can associate with, that I used to associate with homebrewed beer. And obviously I've moved away from that, going to more all grain and dry malt extract, I guess, if I'm going to use extract at all. But I don't normally use 62% sugar either. So,
Yeah.
So that could also be the other thing at play, because, I usually use, maybe a pound or two of sugar in like, a 10-pound grist or something. And so that's a much smaller percentage, definitely less than 20% is sugar most of the time. So it could be a combination of a lot of sugar, and then also maybe some funky liquid malt extract go in there as well.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page here, Will. Phil, thank you so much for reaching out. I can actually relate with the experience of having that odd, what I refer to as kind of a sharp off flavor in my first few batches of homebrew, all of which were made with liquid malt extract, or LME. And like you, I kind of just accepted that it was part of making my own beer at home. Though once I switched to all grain, I realized how wrong that idea was. Oddly enough, I never really used regular sugar when brewing with extract. I don't know if it was because of the homebrew shop I bought my stuff at, but I still got what used to be referred to as a homebrew twang in those first 7 or 8 batches. However, I have brewed many all grain batches with varying amounts of sugar. I think the most I've ever used is 20%. I've never went 62%. And it was, most of the time it was beet sugar, because that's cheaper sugar at the store. And those beers were excellent with no off flavors, certainly no cidery off flavors. In fact, when hard seltzer was blowing up a couple of years ago, a fan of the show sent me a can of hard seltzer that they made themselves that was just water, table sugar, and yeast. And while I wasn't a big fan of it because of how bland the flavor was, it did not taste anything like cider. Now, were they using beet sugar or cane sugar? I have no idea. But, I should say, Phil, that he did put cidery in quotes, and I tried to point that out in reading his comment. And so maybe, he means something else by that cidery thing. Maybe that's why I put it in quotes. Could you get a fermented table sugar flavor? I think that can happen. I don't think in the types of beers where we're typically used to using sugar, like big Belgian styles that are going to, be really, crisp and delicious, but also a little bit rich because of how big they are. Double IPA, triple IPA, stuff like that. I just don't think the other characteristics or that cidery or fermented sugar flavor is going to, shine through the other more pungent characteristics of that beer. I have not experienced it. I don't know, Phil, if you're when you're putting cidery in quotes, if you're just referring to that kind of weird LME off flavor like Will, you were saying, or if there's something with beet sugar that you were getting that maybe I'm just not sensitive to. But regardless, I do appreciate you for hitting us up. And I know there will be other people out there who have their experiences with sugar. Feel free to hit us up with that as well. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. Alrighty, time for a quick break. When we return, we're going to be discussing our experiences with hangovers. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brülosophy sent you. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the exGEERitor, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to exGEERitor.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you.
You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Lips and Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Lips and Ads. Go to lipsandads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
I can't think of a better way to start off an episode on hangovers than by telling a personal story. Now, at this point in my life, I've had plenty of hangovers and stories to go with those, but I thought it might be fun to share my very first experience with a hangover. I forget my exact age when this happened, but I'm going to admit I wasn't quite legal yet, as I imagine most people's listening to this show's stories go. One of my friends had an older brother when I was in high school who was able to score a fake ID. These things weren't terribly difficult to find in Seattle in the 90s, apparently. I never had one, but hey, you know, my buddy's brother did. So a few of us compiled our money together and gave it to my friend's brother, and he bought us a rack of, please don't laugh, Bud Ice. Myself and a couple of friends sat around one afternoon while our parents were away from home, and we just drank can after can of this very odd, I guess, kind of beer-like thing. It was malt liquor, so not really beer, but regardless, it had quite a bit of booze in it. I actually remember at one point, I believe I guzzled like 3 or 4 cans, something like that, asking my friends if they were feeling anything because I felt completely normal. Now, mind you, I was just sitting in a chair crushing these cans of Bud Ice because I wanted to see what it felt like, right? Now, that was the case until I stood up, at which point I was bumbling over myself. My legs felt like cooked spaghetti. The world started spinning, and all I remember was making my way to a couch where I ended up falling asleep. I don't remember exactly how long, but I know that it was quite a bit later than when I had closed my eyes. And when I woke up, I felt like I'd been tumbled in a dryer. My head was pounding. My mouth tasted like hell. I was sweating bullets. My stomach was sour. It was just awful. I didn't feel drunk anymore, but I definitely felt something, and it sucked. Well, not long after waking up, I found myself praying to the porcelain god and swearing I'd never drink again. You know, you've been there. Yet here I am today, and in nearly the 30 years since then, I've adopted a few practices that I feel have helped me to avoid such intense hangovers. What about you, Will? Are you open to sharing one of your earlier experiences with a hangover?
Oh, man. I don't know if this is an early experience, so this is probably the worst hangover story I have. Maybe we should save for the next segment. We'll go right here. So when I was in college, there was this event called Chili Fest, and Chili Fest took place outside of College Station, Texas, in the lovely town of Snook, Texas. And it's a big thing. So the whole deal is there's a Friday night where all the chili teams get together and they have like basically a big party. And it's a chili cooking competition, but it's more like drinking teams with chili problems than, actually anybody caring about cooking chili. And so there were a few people that did, but my chili team actually cooked 0 chili. And, we get there, it's Friday afternoon, it's hot out because it's like Texas and spring, and we're dragging like coolers to go set up our tent or whatever. We actually just set up like a tarp and slept underneath that. And after I'm all hot and I'm all like kind of amped up from dragging stuff around and I'm sufficiently dehydrated, I decided it's time to start pounding beer. So I start pounding beer, and the next thing you know, you keep pounding them and you're going around and the party's kicking up, and then it's crazy because you go into some of these booths and like these frats and sororities are putting on their own chili team kind of area, and there's like stripper poles in a random booth here and like craziness, and you're just basically pounding beer the whole time, obviously not hydrating at all during any of this.
Yeah.
After dragging stuff through the hot sun. And next thing you know, I'm like kind of time traveling a little bit, where I'm like skipping things and like all of a sudden moving through time. And then at some point in the middle of the night, after some sufficient time travel, I'm back at my camp. No porcelain god to be had, just porta potties around. But I'm in a trash can going at it, and then I wake up the next morning, and it goes on into the next day, and you're like, oh man, this is so miserable because it's still kind of hot out. You're outside, you're dehydrated, and you're puking into the next day. And so it wasn't until the headliner of the whole thing, Robert Earl Keen, came on stage that finally, through the haze, I emerged and got to go enjoy Robert Earl Keen headline Chili Fest. And that was my first Robert Earl Keen concert, was me coming out of a hangover. So maybe maybe that's why The Road Goes On Forever and the Party Never Ends resonates so well for me. But the benefit is that since I didn't really drink at all that day, I got to be the DD for the people that were drinking all afternoon, because the cops lined up between Snook and College Station for the post event, and so I got to be the DD, and I was totally sober, if not just a little hungover. So that's a great story of all the things not to do.
Yeah. Hey, look, everybody needs a friend like you, Will, the one who ties it on real hard the first night so that the second day they get to drive everyone around. Thankfully, we have things like Uber and Lyft nowadays, which we use often, even if we're just going out for a couple of cocktails on a Friday night or something. So in no way are we, encouraging people to be unsafe or irresponsible, though, life is short. Do what you want to do to have some fun. So what I thought we would do is start by chatting about the things that we do to reduce the chances of having a hangover. And just to get it out there up front, the most obvious way to do this is by not drinking alcohol at all. We know this, but that's not very fun for us. And so we're not going to focus on that piece of it because we're a beer podcast. We are a couple of guys who are fully aware of the risks of drinking and choose to do so anyways. So, Will, when you know you're going to be drinking perhaps a bit more heavily than usual in a way that might lead you to having a hangover the next day, are there certain things that you do to stave off the potential hangover?
So my number one thing that I do is hydrate. Yeah. I'm a big fan of liquid IV. Getting those electrolytes into your system any way possible. Liquid IV, it's kind of like a powdery thing, kind of like the powdered Gatorade or Powerade or whatever. So if you do liquid IV, if you do Gatorade, Powerade, Brondo, anything with electrolytes, it's good to hydrate. It's good to drink water. It's good to be, just have that there, because alcohol is a diuretic, which means that every time it makes you pee a lot, and then you get really dehydrated really fast. So if you can stay hydrated, help push those toxins through your system, to me, that's like a really, really big deal. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're preaching to the choir on this one. This is kind of the obvious way to avoid the worst parts of a hangover is don't allow yourself to get dehydrated. My wife, I swear to God, my wife keeps liquid IV in business. Every time she goes to Costco, she's coming back with one of those big bags of the stuff. She drinks it even when she's not drinking alcohol, just because she likes it so much. But we have every flavor that they've ever put out. And they actually have some caffeinated ones, which is kind of cool. The blending of caffeine with a hydration solution or whatever they want to call it, I think is pretty convenient because it also peps you up a little bit. But without a doubt, I think the most important thing you can do is don't forget to drink your water. Even if you're blending in electrolytes with that water, you need to have good hydration before you go out and start drinking dehydrating alcoholic beverages. It helps immensely. And that's science is behind that. Again, I don't think we're teaching anything new on this one. The other big thing for me, and I already kind of hit on it with talking about the caffeine liquid IVs, is be well rested. Now, I'm not trying to say that I plan my drinking so far ahead of time that I sleep in additionally because I know I'm going to be drinking that night. I've just found that when I'm tired, alcohol hits way harder, and the mix of being drunk and tired turns into some pretty harsh hangovers for me. And what I've determined, so you take something like a Friday night. Now, everybody knows I've got a real job. Unfortunately, Brülosophy is not that. I wish it could be, but that's not the state we're in right now. And so I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. So Friday nights are usually fun nights when we're going over to our neighbor's house. We might play some board games, play some other games, but we're drinking pretty heavily, playing pool, whatever it might be. Now, when I do that on a Friday night, I find that it can be 10:30 and I'm 4 or 5 drinks in and I feel like I've had 7 or 8 drinks already. And so, in my head, I'm thinking, what is going on here? The problem is there's this weird paradox wherein the more I end up drinking, the more I convince myself I can handle more, because despite being tired, and I don't know if this is something you share here, Will, but despite being tired, it's like the booze makes me feel, oddly enough, more capable or less tired in a weird way. And so I end up consuming more alcohol, which leads to these hangovers that do not feel very good. So if you are super duper tired, one thing you can do is take a nap before you go out with your friends, if that's something that you fancy. I don't do naps. They make me feel like crap. But if I'm really tired, I do kind of temper myself a little bit more when I am drinking, because I know, in my experience at least, waking up the next day, even if I get great sleep, I'm still not going to feel as good as if I had started drinking when I was well rested the day before.
So for me, I'm more of a day drinker. I don't like to stay out late drinking. That's not really my thing. The old saying, nothing good happens after midnight. Well, I'm now old enough where I'm like, well, nothing good happens after 10 o'clock, really. Probably not 9 o'clock either. So I like to get sleep now that my kids let me do that. So I'm more of a day drinker. But yeah, if we're going to go out and I know we're going to be up late for a concert or something, then I'm all about the pre-game nap, just because, like you said, somehow that mental fatigue, when you throw alcohol in there, kind of escalates poor decision making, if you will.
I mean, the thing is I've got a long track record of not making too terrible of decisions when I'm drunk. My wife will say that there are times where I'll be absolutely lit. I might not even remember some aspects of the night before, and she'll tell me I didn't even know. I couldn't even tell, because I tend to just kind of be the same dorky person that I am now. Call it congruent, call it something else. So that's not my concern. And I'm with you. The older I get, the less appealing staying out super late is. But I have found that those Friday nights that I can go start drinking at 5 or 6 o'clock p.m. on a Saturday and blast through to 2 a.m. and be totally fine the next day. But for some reason, those Fridays where I'm waking up 2-3 hours earlier than I would on a Saturday, it just hits me so hard. And I don't know if there's some scientific explanation for drinking while tired. Don't get me wrong. I understand feeling more drunk, inebriated at the time of drinking, but for some reason, the hangovers tend to be worse as well. Another more obvious, I think, pre-drinking behavior that people need to remember to do. And I have one very particular friend. His name is Jersey Bird, who actually intentionally doesn't eat before he drinks because he wants the alcohol to hit a little bit faster. Make sure that you're drinking on a full stomach. That food in your stomach does help to absorb some of the alcohol faster, but it also slows down the absorption of alcohol into your bloodstream, which can help you manage your drinking a bit better because it's not hitting you as fast or as hard. And there are certain foods that I particularly prefer to eat before a night of where I know I'm going to be hitting it pretty hard. What about you, Will? Are you a pre-drinking eater?
So there is science behind all this too. You metabolize alcohol differently on an empty stomach. So, when your body is dealing with this toxin you're ingesting, it basically starts kicking out all these kind of side products. And I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to go into all these names that I can't pronounce. But essentially, you're getting extra toxins thrown into your bloodstream when you do it on a fasted state versus when you actually have a full stomach. So to me, I did this one time not that long ago where I was trying to lose weight. So I had a salad for lunch, and then I had a salad with chicken for dinner. And then I started drinking, and that really didn't cut it for me because I got 2 drinks in and I was like, why am I so slammed? Oh yeah, all I had to eat today was salad. So to me, if you really want to drink that night and that's your goal, so to speak, is I would say something with carbs, pizza, something like a hamburger. All these things that are really bad for you, but tacos are a great go-to for me because I live in San Antonio. So those are the things I like to eat on nights that I'm going to be drinking quite a bit, because those things have enough carb and enough protein, enough stuff in there that I can really just kind of I can feel the grease working, Marshall. I don't know why.
So back in 2003, my wife is Latvian. I've talked about that before. She's full-blooded Latvian. Both sides of her family are from the country of Latvia. And we went out there for the first time in 2003. And one of the as most Eastern European countries are, Latvians have their traditional bread is this really dense rye bread called rupjmaize. And it is, I love the stuff, but it's kind of a love or hate type of deal. I know many of Latvians who don't like it, but one of the unique things that they do, and I was told by a local over there that it's specifically for helping people to not get too drunk fast. It's like drinking food, but it's also hangover food, is they take this very dense rye bread and they deep fry it. So it's just literally greasy, deep fried bread. So you've got kind of the best of both drinking worlds, right? You got the greasy and you got that carby. And I love it. I think it's great. We went out there again last summer, took the kids and ordered a whole box of this stuff as well while we're, sipping cocktails on a cruise. But yeah, I'm with you. I feel like there's something to that greasy carby thing that really does just make drinking more enjoyable, but also it makes me feel a little bit better. It does, the alcohol hits in a way that I kind of want it to, if that makes sense. One way that I like to think about this is that the reason a lot of breweries are probably doing food trucks is because food trucks offer the exact kind of food that's perfect for this purpose. We've got a local food truck here. It's called Roma, and it's just this, oh my God, it's this Italian food that's phenomenal for a food truck, especially. And so whenever they're out at Crow and Wolf or whatever, my wife and I will order some meatballs and mozzarella sticks. That kind of food just really, it's sticky and the alcohol works well with it once it's in your body. And then also there's another kind of a side benefit to eating. Same thing with drinking a lot of water prior to going to the alcohol, is that you're full now. And so feeling full is going to slow down your consumption. If you're like me and you just don't even, you're a non-thinking drinker where you're just kind of crushing, pint after pint without really thinking about it, being full is going to slow that down. And if you slow down the rate at which you're consuming alcohol, you're going to slow down the impact it has, which could potentially have positive benefits for the potential hangover the next morning.
Oh, that's 100%. Like, one of my favorite spots here in town is Roadmap Brewing, and their food truck is called Last Place Burgers. And they have these smash burgers where they actually take Wagyu patties and smash, and then they have cool things like pickled onions and whatever else. And they're my favorite burger in town. And so if you take one of my favorite breweries in town and couple with my favorite burger in town, it's a home run for me. But yeah, you sit there, you eat the burger. It slows down your drinking on the first pint or two because you're eating while you're drinking. You got some fries to munch on, and then again that grease, that salt, that those carbs, they all just kind of work really well together to kind of like absorb everything that's going on there and create a better experience for me.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to get some feedback from listeners on what their favorite pre-drinking foods are. Don't worry, we are going to get to eating as a way to deal with hangovers as well. But yeah, I realized very early in my drinking career, if you will, that having a full stomach just helps so incredibly much. And not just what I ate. I mean, I could go with a salad, but like you, it doesn't work as well. I want something bready. I recently got into sourdough bread making, which is, if you're not making sourdough bread, there's a lot of carryover from the brewing world with fermentation and all of that. So you can kind of geek out on something that takes way less time. But one of my favorite things now is just to cut off a slice of fresh made sourdough, that's a day old or whatever, toast it up, slap some butter on there and eat that right before going out and drinking. And there's something about it that I just feel it kind of like sets me up for a nice night out, even if I'm still going to go eat dinner or something. So now there are some supplements that have come out over the last, decade or so. And I know people have been selling snake oil for hangover cures and all of that for decades, but there are some things that have come out now that have really strong reviews that purportedly have science backing them up. And I guess are getting kind of popular. These supplements commonly consist of things like probiotics. Some of them have like a proprietary probiotic or bacteria, right? That once it hits your gut, it metabolizes the alcohol differently and yada, yada, yada. Some people swear by these things. In fact, I know that our own Jordan Folks uses I believe it's ZBiotics brand supplement for avoiding hangovers. And he told me last time we talked about it that he thinks it really does help. So I've never personally tried ZBiotics. About 6 or 7 years ago, a friend of mine had a little capsule, one of these supplements that he swore or told me that people were swearing by, to avoid hangovers. I took I took 2 of them. In fact, you're supposed to take it prior to drinking. I did that. And then I tied one on very intentionally as a test because, took one for the science team. And it didn't do anything. I felt exactly the same the following morning. Now, I don't know if that supplement was necessarily a probiotic or if there was some other hocus pocus in it, but for me, it didn't really do anything, and it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, figuratively, of course, for the supplement thing. I really don't like to ingest, man-made pills. I try to do it as little as possible. So the idea of blending that with alcohol is some sort of a belief, confirmation bias is confirmation bias. There are going to be people who wake up and swear to God that they feel better, even though they probably don't. So there is that. But anyways, these supplements haven't seemed to help me when I've tried them. And I know that other people's stories are different. Will, have you ever tried these things before?
So it's funny you mentioned ZBiotic, because when Jordan Folks came to San Antonio, I picked him up from the airport, and before we went out drinking, he literally had one and chugged it right beforehand, which, I don't think we drank that much that night, so I'm not sure it was warranted or anything, but he totally swears by ZBiotic, and I went to try to find some research papers, and there's one paper I found that said, yeah, it does pretty well, and then another one that had more mixed reviews, and so I don't really know the benefit there, but let's not forget the old Sam Adams yogurt and yeast trick that Martin Keene so eloquently put on the YouTube channel after you kind of paved the way for us to try that with your original YouTube video, Marshall.
Yeah. By the way, doesn't work. I think, again, I'm a psychologist, so I think about things from that perspective pretty naturally. It just kind of comes natural for me. Confirmation bias is very, very powerful. We all engage in it all the time. No one wants to feel like something they've invested time, effort, money, energy in, that it wasn't worth it. And so we are kind of naturally inclined to tell ourselves it works. It's part of the reason that I love the scientific process so much, right? It's why Brülosophy exists, is I'm comfortable admitting that my biases may be influencing my opinion about certain things or my experience of certain things. My experience with these pills, they haven't worked, but I have not tried ZBiotics. I told Jordan I'd be happy to. I am not spending money on it. One pill costs about as much as one pint. I'd rather drink the beer than swallow the pill. So that's where I'm at with those. But again, I've heard from multiple people, not just Jordan, who have had positive experiences with these things. And honestly, I if it were up to me, I'd be the person behind the product, because they're probably making a lot of money off of something that costs very little to produce. And in my opinion, that's the real goal behind those things. But if it works for you, carry on with your bad self. Now, one other thing, I'm speaking here now to only those people who live in areas. I don't know, if it's countries. I know that there's certain states in California where, other inebriants are perfectly legal recreationally now, maybe not federally, but if your goal is just to get a bit of a buzz in one way, some form or fashion, then maybe, and this is something that, I know people who've done this many times. I might be one of them. You engage in the other inebriant maybe a little bit more so that you're still feeling saucy and good and having fun and light, you're kind of lightening the load a little bit, but you're not drinking as much, because we know those other inebriants like cannabis, which is the only one I'm actually thinking of right now, to not beat around the bush. We know that there's at least for the most part, I don't think people experience hangovers with that. You can still have a perfectly enjoyable time. And for me, at least, when I'm inebriated in that form, I'm not nearly as thoughtful about my drinking. And which means for me, again, that I'm not drinking as much. And I think that works out well for a lot of people. In fact, I know quite a few people who have replaced a good portion of their drinking with a consumption of cannabis, and it works well for them. They feel healthier. They're not consuming all of the bad parts that come with beer, at least. So yeah, regardless of what you do, please be safe. We're probably going to say that a few times in this. We're not encouraging anybody to get behind the wheel of a car or, go start using heavy equipment or even go swimming, when you're inebriated in any form. That is not healthy. But there are going to be some things that I've kind of come up with. We're going to move on to, okay, you're out with your friends, you're drinking, and you realize, crap, I've taken it a little bit too far and I'm not ready to stop yet. We've had a lot of fun, but I'm not going to be feeling good tomorrow. What can I do now to try to stave off that hangover? Are there any tricks that understanding that when you're drunk, sometimes you don't think as logically as you do when you're sober, but that you've been in these experiences, Will, I'm sure, where you feel it hitting and you're like, God, I'm not ready to stop yet. Is there anything that you do in those times that to try to, stave off the potential hangover?
So I'd say before we move on too far, I would just add that pre-drinking thing, like just judge your mental state as well. I have a state that I call the warpath, and it's a tad nihilistic, and it's not a good headspace for me. So if I'm in that space, mature me knows not to drink. Just like don't drink, just like drink some water, drink some fizzy water, and like do something else, because more productive with your time than drinking. Not there's like a million other things more productive with your time than drinking. So, but yeah, but yeah. So I would just say judge your mental state. Be a good judge of your own character.
Yeah.
Like if you're drinking and you're not in a good mental space, you're gonna have a bad time anyways, and other people are gonna have a bad time too. So but yeah, you took it too far. You've already had a few drinks. You're like, oh man. And what's great is once you've already taken it too far, you're already inebriated, so you're already impaired and making poor choices already. So it gets a little hard. So you got to have a little bit of discipline, a little bit of self-awareness. But for me, the worst thing I can do when I've been drinking is, if you want to cut yourself off, you can. That's a good method. But like, if you want to keep drinking, keep the night going on, I don't recommend crossing the streams. Like, if you're already on beer, I wouldn't start hitting, tequila and then whiskey and then something else all in the same evening. To me, when you start crossing those streams, I get weird things happen to me that result in really nasty hangovers, in my opinion.
Okay. I've researched this whole like mixing of different types of alcohol thing. There's really nothing behind it. The issue is the potency of what you're drinking. So I've got family members who are, a couple of decades older than I am, who swear by, back in the 60s, we were told beer before liquor and blah, blah, blah. You're a sick mister or something like that. That can be true, but it's not because of the alcohol itself. It's because of the strength of it. If I start off by drinking a 6-pack of Miller Lite and then buddy comes over and wants to start taking shots of Fireball, I'm being cheeky intentionally here. That is not a good idea, not because of the blending of Fireball and Miller Lite, though. It's because that Fireball's got 40% alcohol versus the 4.8% alcohol in the Miller Lite. And I've already moved, I'm already sauced up enough on the beer. So yeah, the blending can be trouble. So I'm with you. One of my things is if I'm already feeling pretty buzzed, I will actually cut myself off, even if it's just for a limited amount of time. And I know that some people don't even think this way, but when I get to that point where I'm going, all right, it's only 8:30, we're going to be out till midnight and I want to keep having a good time, I will not only cut myself off from alcohol for say 45 minutes, I'll go grab a huge glass of water and just chug it. I don't care if it hurts my stomach, but I do it specifically to fill my gut up so that I don't feel enticed to have another beer immediately, but also to hydrate myself, because like we've talked about in the last section there, beer is a diuretic, and I've been going to the bathroom multiple times. I want to kind of replace some of that good hydrating water in my body while I'm taking this limited break. And I know that's weird. I don't say it out loud. It's not like I'm telling my friends I'm stopping. They don't even notice. It's just for me. It's one way that I've come to find out, or kind of deal with reducing the impact of the hangover the next morning. And then another thing, again, we already talked about it in the past one. If I feel myself getting a little bit dizzy and I'm starting to feel it hit a little bit harder than maybe I had expected, I will go buy some sort of a starchy or, somewhat fatty food. My favorite while I'm drunk food is French fries or tater tots. It's potatoes fried, you got greasy starch, and just kind of snacking on those for a while I'm taking that break, especially drinking some water to kind of recover a little bit. For me, at least, I feel like it helps quite a bit.
So the water thing, my wife and I have kind of like it's a rule for us, and I think it's an arbitrary rule, but alternating a drink with water when you're out. That way, again, you're kind of like getting an intermission between drinks. You're staying hydrated, and it kind of helps you pace out throughout the evening, where you're not like slamming 2-3 drinks in an hour. You're having, a beer and then a water. And if you drink the water as slowly as you drank the beer, then usually you can like spread that out over, the better part of an hour. And then again, the foods, like you said, the snacks, those are great too, because if you're like over there trying to snack at a snack bar or whatever, that again is taking time away where you're distracting yourself. So not only are you putting some more starchy, fatty stuff inside of you and making the grease work at, slowing down that alcohol metabolization, but you're also taking time away from that, because again, time is your friend here. So if you can stretch out your drink over amount of time, then you're going to be, metabolizing alcohol at a much more reasonable rate.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I've done the thing, particularly when I go to beer events, HomebrewCon, these other events that I've gone to throughout the last decade or so, Hop Harvest, stuff like that. I very strictly stick to a water between every beer. And it's easy because you go to these events and usually you have just a taster glass and you're going around getting different samples. So what I tell myself is, well, I don't want to mix up the samples. I want to taste the pure beer that I'm trying. So I'm going to go rinse my glass out. Well, I rinse it. I fill it up again. It's just a taster glass. I fill it up again with water and then I chug that water and I move on to the next beer. And I found people have asked me, how in the world? They're like, we saw you yesterday drinking from 11 o'clock in the morning till midnight. How in the world are you feeling okay today? And I've never woken up with a legit hangover at one of these events. And I think that's part of the reason. I also do this weird thing where if I'm feeling a little woozy at the time and I'm getting there and it's still early and I want to keep going, I have no problems taking perfectly legal caffeine pills. I'll pop a Vivarin or a No-Dose, or even I'll just take a couple of Excedrin, which is acetaminophen and caffeine, which I never take. So these are things that I use just for that reason. And it'll put a little pep in my step, kind of wake me up. Again, caffeine is also a diuretic. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. But you want to be careful when you're mixing caffeine with alcohol because of the diuretic thing. They're both that. By drinking more water or drinking a liquid IV or a Gatorade in between. But that's something that I found works really well for me to kind of pull me out of the I'm going down the wrong path, experience.
Yeah. Speaking of caffeine, so we have we call it medicine, but it's just basically Crown and Coke, right?
Yeah.
But again, you can mix that as strong or not strong as you want. So we'll do like a Crown and Coke Zero, but instead of like pouring like two or so shots in the whole can of Coke Zero, you can get down to like a half shot or a shot, and that again will. A lot of volume of liquid with not as much alcohol with a little bit of caffeine can really kind of like, again, pep me up a little bit to keep me going for a while.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, there are times where I've already just tied one on and I'm kind of in the spirit world and I'm thinking, all right, I'm done drinking, but I know that tomorrow's going to be awful if I don't do something. And there are some things that I'm not sure I necessarily intentionally came up with these things, but, as intentional as you can be when you're plastered, I started doing certain things that I've found have helped immensely. And one of those is, particularly on cooler evenings, is to just go out for like a 2-mile walk. I know that some people aren't going to do that and might think that that's crazy. Usually what I'll do is just ask a couple friends of mine, hey, who wants to go for a walk? We can have a chat or whatever. We're just sitting inside doing that anyways. I love it. I get out, I'll grab the dog. I did this last weekend. I got my dog and we went for like a 1.5-mile walk, just me and him at 11:30 at night. It was a really nice, cool evening or night at this point. And for me, not only is that exercise kind of helping to work, at least in my mind, kind of work some of the alcohol out of your system, it just feels good. You're getting that fresh air, you're moving, your blood is moving. That's just something that I've always done. I mean, we took some friends with us. We have a timeshare in Orlando, Florida. We took some friends out there, almost 16, 17 years ago. And I remember one night we were trying all of these local beers that we don't get out here in California. And it just hit really hard. And so I made myself a bagel and I went out for a 45-minute walk in this cool area where there's probably alligators everywhere. I didn't even think about that at the time, but yeah, it just made me feel so much better. I came back, I was able to sleep at night and I woke up feeling fine. So that's another thing that I like to do is take a walk.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good science behind that. When you're taking a walk, your body's moving, you're pumping blood, so you're actually metabolizing through that alcohol kind of a bit quicker, and you're just getting them through your system a little faster. And there's a lot of good science behind that. I find that if I am towards the end of the night of drinking, and I know that things have gone too far, the old ibuprofen before you go to bed.
Oh yeah, just
kind of getting ahead of it a bit. That really works pretty well for me, as long as you're not in a state where you're like already worshiping porcelain gods or anything. Ibuprofen and some water before bed. You're getting water, you're getting ibuprofen, and if it's late at night, you're set up to kind of have that kicking through all the way into the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree. I usually forget to take the ibuprofen at night, but I will, the first thing I do when I wake up is if I'm not feeling great, is I'll pop 2 or 3 ibuprofen. That's definitely my go-to for avoiding the headaches and the other aches and pains that come with having a hangover. The final thing I've got on my list for if I'm already there and I'm just like trying to avoid the pain the next day is, and I don't know where this came from, but my wife still makes fun of me for it. I will nowadays, I'll just hop into a cold or a cool shower. If it's summertime, I'll go as long as there's somebody outside with me, just in case, right? I'll hop into my pool and just kind of cool off. And that kind of wakes me up for a little bit and brings me back to real life. Back when I was in grad school, my wife has photos of this that I'm sure some people would be very offended if we shared, though it shows nothing special, of me sitting in bathtubs eating like white bread of like cold water bathtub, just with swimsuit on, eating bread. It's something that I used to do in my college days, and it worked great. And I would just kind of hang out there and chat with whoever wanted to come in. And now I've got a pool, so I don't really have to use the bathtub for that purposes. But like I said, that cold shower, cold bath, it does something for me. It's kind of snaps me out of it. And especially if it's on a night like a Friday night where I'm already tired when I'm drinking, just to kind of get me through the next hour or two so that when I go to sleep, it's not at the height of that drunkenness, so that I don't wake up feeling like crap.
That's peak Marshall right there. You're in your swim trunks, sitting in a cool bath, eating white bread. That's just life goals, everybody. That's peak Marshall shot. Take that mental image and scar yourself later. That's what I'm going for.
Hey, dude, whatever works though, Will.
And back to your mental state, I'm willing to bet that if you're in a good space, there is too much of a good time, but I'm willing to bet if you're in a good space, things are probably going to be just fine. And then if you're in a bad space, like you're on the warpath, like I call it, my bet is that bad decisions, time traveling, and a bad hangover are incoming.
Yeah. Yep. I'm lucky enough to where I don't even know if it's a decision that I've made, but if I'm in a bad space, which is very rare, I'm kind of my wife has referred to me as annoyingly optimistic. But if I'm dealing with something, I have a natural tendency to avoid wanting to be inebriated in any way whatsoever until the problem is solved, because I am fully aware that my problem solving abilities are hindered a bit when I'm drunk. And so I just kind of, I'm a happy drunk, as people say. So I guess I'm fortunate in that. But yeah, I agree with you. If you know that you're in a bad space, and we all know people who are like this, and you start drinking and you become a dick, be careful. You got people who love you, and don't ruin those relationships. Don't do anything that's going to get you hurt. So, well, I think that about covers our experiences trying to avoid getting a hangover either prior to or while drinking. When we're back from this break, we're going to be focusing more on how we deal with actual hangovers. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of work, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts.
Ever tried reading while jogging, cooking, or even juggling flaming torches? Yeah, it doesn't end well. But with audiobooks.com, you can conquer books without the circus act. Dive into over 450,000 titles, including more than 10,000 free ones. Get hooked on a bestseller, find your next obsession, or finally read that classic you've been avoiding since high school. And here's the inside scoop. Sign up today for a free 30-day trial and snag your first 3 audiobooks on the house. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. That's audiobooks.com/podcastFREE.
As crappy as hangovers are, and no matter how much effort we might put into trying to avoid them, the inevitable is bound to happen. The party was more fun than expected. The celebration went later than intended. The beer was really delicious. Whatever the reason, if you drink alcohol, you will get the occasional hangover. Now, I've certainly had my fair share. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I had one of the worst hangovers of my life. As a 43-year-old man, we went out to Teppanyaki to celebrate a friend's birthday. In fact, it was Craig, who does the Average Brew reviews with us. And our cook for the night noticed that we were ready for a good time. So he started pouring us free shots. We'd already had a couple of Asahis and we were working on this big bottle of sake. But hey, who am I to turn down free shots, right? So, at that point, the next morning, I really wish I would have turned these down. But I woke up with this absolutely throbbing headache, and it was like this pinpoint. It hurt so bad. And it turned into a full-blown migraine within about 45 minutes of me waking up. And it kept me in bed until 2 p.m. Now, I'm an early riser. I get up at 7 or earlier most days of the week, regardless of how late I was up the night before drinking. This was so bad. Well, in talking with my wife about it that morning, she reminded me about all of those free shots, the ones that were warm and poured from the cook's squeeze bottle, which I hadn't noticed the night before. The shots of clear liquid that tasted exactly like rubbing alcohol. Yeah, it was then that I realized our incredibly generous chef, who received an amazingly high tip, I should say, was giving us shots of the same high-proof liquor that they use for the old onion volcano. Now, I've never been a teppanyaki chef, but I'm pretty certain those 6 shots I had were either Everclear or rubbing alcohol, because that's exactly what it tasted like. I will never do that again. And as cool as it was for that chef to hook us up with these free shots, I think he knew what he was doing, honestly, and was like, these dudes are going to be 3 sheets in about 5 seconds. What's weird is that the more common hangover symptoms hit later that afternoon. So it's almost like I woke up, it was just something happened to me that where I was legitimately sick, and then the hangover hit like 4 or 5 hours after I woke up. And after that migraine faded, there were definitely some things that I did that I felt helped, things that I've done many times in the past as well, that I felt were helpful. Now, before we get into that, Will, do you either have another hangover experience you want to share with us, where you had to deal with a hangover, or is there anything else you want to start this off with?
Oh, so many hangover experiences. So we were on the Amalfi Coast in the town of Sorrento, and it started out pretty easygoing. We had dinner. I was there with my parents and my brother. This is after I graduated college. We were doing a trip together as a family. And so we just had a nice dinner, and then had a few beers with dinner. And then the next thing I know, we're out and we're trying to find some clubs and bars, me and my brother, and we end up drinking with these Brits, and we're doing all sorts of weird shots at this random bar, and we stay out till way late, drinking way too much, and then we get up the next morning, and what we're supposed to do the next morning, as I'm not feeling well, I'm a little bit nauseous, sour gut, headache, the whole thing going on, and now we're going to do this bus tour down the Amalfi coastline, which the coastline is not a straight line, mind you, and the bus had really bouncy shocks, but we're going back and forth on this little one-way road for buses, and I'm just like dying over there. And so we stop at this like gas station somewhere in the middle, and I get off, and I really quick because and I had to go exercise some demons. The sitting on top, not the throwing up into demons. And so I do that, and I feel a little bit better for the second half of this bus trip. But eventually we get to the city of Amalfi, and after we walk up and down a few hills, see some things, I get some fresh squeezed orange juice from Amalfi Coast. And that's kind of, after that, I got enough electrolytes and my stomach had calmed down enough that I could move on with life and feel like a human being for the rest of the trip. But oh my gosh, that bus with those weird bouncing shocks was the worst feeling in the entire world. So I don't recommend getting drunk before going on an Amalfi Coast bus tour. That's a really bad idea.
Just the thought of that makes me ill. Oh my God. I get motion sickness anyways. And we've all been there where you're like, I got to drive somewhere tomorrow. This is going to be awful. And the thought of a bumpy, windy bus ride. Oh my God. No, thank you. So now, Will, you had mentioned to me that you have this kind of hangover hierarchy, and I'm curious what exactly that means. And tell us more about this hierarchy.
Yes, the world debut of Will's hangover hierarchy. And so the reason this kind of like idea came to mind is because depending on where I'm at in this hierarchy, really kind of relates to these remedies that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And so, the first phase 0, if you will, if you wake up the next morning and you don't have a hangover, which is the goal, right? And we don't want hangovers, then you're good to go. You don't have to act on anything. But the kind of the first little spot in the hangover hierarchy is, I call it the hangover haze, where you just kind of have this foggy brain. It's a little bit harder to think. You're a little bit slow on the draw. And that's the hangover haze. And then the next step beyond that to me is the shh, be quiet, please. And this is just the wicked headache that comes with some of those hangovers, and it doesn't feel very good. And then the further up the hierarchy you get, because you start getting into these fun, like, nausea, other like more stomach related ones. Now you're starting to get in the buy one get one free and combo locos. So So if you get the sour gut where just things aren't settling well, sometimes you could, if it's too high, then it's kind of a nauseous feeling like I had on that trip down the Amalfi Coast. These usually come along with the wicked headache or the foggy brain or whatever else, and that's not really a good feel. And then kind of the last step for me is what I call exercising the demons. And this is a two-part problem. One is either sitting on or facing the porcelain throne, depending on how bad off you are, or sometimes both. So again, you get to the exercise the demons part. Usually it's a combo loco with pretty much everything down the list. And depending on where I'm at in this hangover hierarchy, really depends on which one of these solutions we're going to talk about in a minute will come into effect and help out.
I love your breakdown of the different experiences of having a hangover, Will. Very nice job. You should write a book about this.
Oh, I've got the experience. Oh, it's hard-earned, horrendous experience. But again, those BOGOs and combo locos, those are just the worst because, rarely are you going to have the porcelain problem without like the wicked headache and nausea and everything else going along with it. Oh, so awful.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, all of our friends, I'm kind of known for in our group being the guy who, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to get hangovers very readily. So I'm pretty fortunate in that. I would say that, 90% of the time I go out drinking, I wake up the next morning and I feel perfectly fine. Even after like 5 hours of sleep and I was pretty lit the night before, it just doesn't hit me in the way that it hits other people. And so I consider myself fortunate for that. But obviously there have been hundreds of times where I've pushed it way too far and I've woke up just feeling absolutely smashed and like I don't want to do anything that whole day, but we're responsible adults. We got to get up and do our thing. So this is going to sound a little bit similar to some of the stuff we've already talked about before, but I feel like the context is different and the way that I approach it is differently. Or I should put it this way. The last thing I usually want to do if I wake up with that headache, hangover, and just feeling not very good, wherever that falls on your hierarchy, Will, the last thing I want to do is ingest anything. So I force myself. I always go to sleep with a big Stanley of water next to my bed. I force myself to just chug as much as I can until my stomach hurts. And telling myself, hey, if I'm going to puke, whatever. I want something in there anyways. Usually I don't throw up. I hate throwing up, so I'm able to kind of swallow it, right? That sounds gross. I just mean hold it down. So I'll wake up and I chug a bunch of water and then I lay back down. I might get on my phone and play a couple of games of solitaire or something. But I try to just kind of rest after waking up for about 45 minutes. Usually everyone in my house is still asleep while continuously ingesting water to hydrate. Again, I chug it, but I know that other people don't have the capacity in their guts the way that I do for liquid. And so if you drink too fast, it might actually cause you to barf. So, be cognizant of that. But that's one of the first things I do. If my wife happens to get up before me and we had a rough night the night before and she recognizes that, I could be feeling a little shitty, she will usually go and make me like a liquid IV and bring it back. And if that's the case, I chug that as well. I just want to get it into my system as fast as possible.
So I'm usually good to hydrate. I like to hydrate in the morning after I've been drinking all night, and I love liquid IV, as we said earlier. So again, I'm waking up the next morning. I'm all for hammering a liquid IV, but when I start getting into those kind of like sour gut, exercising the demons kind of modes, like adding to my stomach is going to just lead to more upset stomach. So I don't usually do it, but in general, hydration is good for all stages. But if you're already in that upset stomach thing, it can lead to more agitation, but if I wake up with just a headache or foggy brain or just maybe a little bit of a sour gut, not too nauseous, then hydration is definitely the first step I go to in the morning. And I love liquid IV, like you said. And so I'll probably pound that with it just to get those electrolytes in there.
Yeah, and I'm another weird thing about me is I'm kind of neurotic about drinking water. I drink at least a gallon of water every day. It's just kind of a thing I do. I work in an environment that makes it fairly easy. I have a half-gallon water jug that I take to work with me, and I make sure that it's gone before I leave work. And then by the time I get home, I'll have another 3 or 4 sparkling waters. I don't drink soda. I only drink coffee in the morning, and that's it. So I basically drink coffee, water, and then booze. And that's it. So I have a lot of water. I'm kind of already starting, on the right step when it comes to staying hydrated. So for me to chug something quick in the morning really helps. I always also like to take, we mentioned this earlier, that's where I'll take, 600 to 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, kind of depending on how bad the headache is. And that'll take a good 45 minutes to an hour for me, at least when I'm laying down in bed, to kick in. And that's when I'll pull out my phone, play some solitaire, check out Reddit, whatever. And usually that will do most of the trick. I might not feel 100%, but I'm at least able to get up, start a pot of coffee, and kind of get on with my day. Now, I always drink coffee every single morning. I don't feel right. Call it an addiction. I don't care. I don't feel right until I've had my cup of coffee in the morning. But there are times if I'm a bit hungover where that doesn't sound very good. I still drink it. It's a part of my routine. And one, I know that if I don't have that coffee, I'm going to have a headache even if I'm sober because of the caffeine, my body's need for that morning caffeine. So I make sure to stick with that routine because I don't want to contribute any more to whatever I'm already feeling with my hangover. So I'll make that coffee. If it's too hot, I might ice it down just to make it easier to drink. And then I start to think about other things to eat to try to, counter this hangover that I've got.
Yeah, I think food is a good idea. Again, for most of those kind of early stages in that hierarchy, the lower stages, but once you get into like the nausea, sour gut kind of mode of it, then you kind of have to be a little bit more in tune with your body there, because sometimes nausea, you eat, basically an egg on a piece of toast, and that's like going to cure you right away. And then sometimes it's going to exacerbate problems. So I have to like kind of lean into what my gut is telling me. I have a notoriously foul, evil stomach, so I have to like kind of battle with it, and even after 40 something years we still have to like kind of feel through some of these really bad hangovers. So again, if you're facing the porcelain throne, obviously exercising those demons, eating is probably going to cause you to exercise more demons, so probably not the best of ideas, but I do think, especially for those kind of like, nausea, even with headaches and whatever else, some of that stuff, getting some carbs and maybe some protein in there can definitely give you a hand on getting you on the right path to recovery.
If I'll tell you this, if I'm at the tip top of your hierarchy, which we're talking like once every 3 to 4 years for me, I just very rarely get there. It just is coincidental that was 3 weeks ago. The teppanyaki story that I told earlier, that was it for me for like the last 3 years. It was god awful, my friend. I'm telling you, I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. But in those times, I will still try to get some food in my stomach. It's just my selection of food is way different. So if I'm feeling uber sick and I'm already puking and I know that it's going to be like this for the next few hours, I will make toast. And now that I make my own sourdough, it's even tastier in my opinion, and arguably healthier, and slather some butter on that. And I just eat buttered toast until I start to feel better. And even if it comes up, I don't care. I want something in there. Maybe it's mental, but I want something in there to absorb the toxins is the way I look at it. And so that's what I do. Now, 99% of the time I'm feeling perfectly fine, and I just need to get some food in me that I feel is going to counter that hangover. And my absolute favorite, this is the weirdest thing. I developed this in my 20s and it's remained the same for me. And if anybody's gone out on a heavy night of drinking with me and got the pleasure of hanging out the next day when we're trying to figure out what to eat, you'll know this. My absolute favorite hangover food are spicy, brothy soups, whether it's pho or albondigas or pozole or even menudo, which I absolutely love. I know people have some negative opinions about menudo. If it's hot, spicy, and has a thin broth, oh my God, that is a hangover cure for me.
So I'm gonna probably avoid spicy because again that can add some additional kind of things going on in there. But menudo can be delicious. I'll back up menudo. But again, I kind of like the my kind of go-to, if I feel well enough, is I just want like a piece of toast with cheese and an egg on top with just some salt and pepper. And to me, that's like kind of a nice balance of like proteins and, cheese with the egg, and then also that nice little piece of toast. And that's kind of like a nice kind of middle ground for me. I really like to eat that for breakfast if I'm pretty hungover or have a headache that's really bad. But all these things, whether it's food or hydration, I think are coupled pretty well with if you're taking like ibuprofen the next morning, because again, that can help kind of stave off some of these symptoms. If you have a prescription, I'm not advising you take somebody else's. Zofran is a great thing to help nauseated stomachs. If you have a prescription, over the counter, I think omeprazole, like if my stomach's kind of weird, taking an omeprazole kind of with my ibuprofen also kind of helps settle things out. Again, coupling it with the food and the hydration. And honestly, we talked about exercising the demons. If you're on the worshiping of the porcelain throne, exercising the demons path more than once in a blue moon, then let's get you some help, because that shouldn't be the normal of your existence. That should be like the exception. We're coming up with a hierarchy. Now, depending on people's stomachs or whatever else, sitting on the porcelain throne, it's a different problem. But if you're puking every time you're going out drinking, then let's have some chats and get you with the right people.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. We are talking about, I already said it, like once every 2 or 3 years, I get to the point where I know I took it too far and I'm dealing with those consequences. I drank last night. I woke up feeling absolutely perfect this morning. So again, I'm relying on what I know works for me with my drinking. And that is 99% of our experience. We're talking about that 1% time in this episode. Now, there are, you said you stay away from spicy foods because of you've got issues with your gut and all of that. I love spicy food when I'm hungover. And there are a couple of reasons that I've come to that I think it explains my love of spicy food, even if it's like a breakfast burrito, which again, man, sausage and bacon mixed in a big old thick breakfast burrito with some freaking jalapeno in there. That does it for me. That will pull me out of that hangover funk. It's awesome. I think a part of it is that, eating hot food, which I love spicy. It's one of my weird things. It is known to, release endorphins in your body, and those endorphins really help to make me feel good. That's why we have them. It's a part of what, our hormonal system is made up of. Well, there are other things one can do to release endorphins. And I know that there are parents out there who are very picky with what their children might hear, and they might be listening to this show with you, but use your imagination, adult activities. If you happen to wake up next to a beautiful person that you love very much, and you decide to do something with them, for me, in my experience, that is can also very easily pull me out of that little funk and get me going and put a pep in my step, as it were. What about you, Will? Not if you're puking, of course. I don't want to
this is definitely, if you got a foggy brain, we're in the hangover haze portion. Yeah, I could see some endorphin releasing there with a significant other, kind of going on and maybe helping you get out of that funk. Marshall's over there sweating all the booze out with his jalapenos and and then getting a workout, a little pep in his step there as well. There you go. That sounds like a great way to start off the day. One of my absolute favorite ones that I know we're going to talk about is the hair of the dog, because 60% of the time it works all the time. And and I have to say, like, if you got like the headache or the hangover haze, not too much of the gut issues, but like I think a nice michelada in the morning really helps kind of get you in that groove and get you over that step and pull you out of that haze as well.
I'll tell you, dude. So we camp a lot, and when we camp, we drink. I think that's pretty common for people who camp who listen to this show, at least. I'm waking up in the morning. It's the only time that I will wake up and pour, Irish cream whiskey into my coffee. That's just what we do when we're camping. And then as soon as that coffee is gone, I'm cracking a beer. We're pouring micheladas or we're making Bloody Marys, whatever it might be. And I had this realization. I've never woken up with a hangover when I'm camping. And I think a part of it is because when I wake up, I'm still buzzed from the night before and I just keep going, but it's a slow roll. I never get blitzed. I'm never, we're usually doing things that could arguably be somewhat dangerous when we're camping, whether that's whitewater rafting, hanging out on the lake, stuff like that. So it really is kind of this slow burn throughout the day. And I think a weird effect of that, positively for me at least, is that you never get so far into your drunkenness that you kind of lose yourself, and which means that you're not really getting that hangover. Now, when I'm camping, I drink even more water than I do in my regular life. I'm constantly going and having sparkly waters, chugging Gatorades. My wife's making liquid IVs. We've even come. You were talking about the Crown and Coke. One of the things that my wife and I do is we take sparkling water and just add a little bit of vodka to that. So it's kind of the same concept as you, without the caffeine and the Coke, of course, but no sugary drinks, nothing like that. It's just you've got mostly water with maybe a little bit of vodka to kind of keep you on your roll, but that water is still hydrating you. And it's, in my opinion, it overpowers the dehydrating effects of the alcohol, and it works really well for us. I mean, again, when we're camping, it's 7:00 in the morning to midnight. And I wake up feeling great almost every day. So the hair of the dog thing, I think it works. One thing you got to be careful of is something that I've heard referred to as the shampoo effect. Will, have you ever gotten in the shower, you wash your hair and you're like, that was weird. So you throw in some more shampoo, and that second time around, it's like, bam, you got this big head of foam. Kind of the same thing with booze is the alcohol's wearing off in the morning. You had a late night. You wake up, you're feeling all right, but it's coming on. So you have one beer, and next thing you know, you feel like you've had 6-pack. That's definitely something I've experienced. So I don't know, I think it's something you got to be cautious of when you're trying to treat the hangover in this way, at least.
Well, one way of never getting a hangover is to stay drunk perpetually, but it's not a very good long-term course of action. So hair of the dog is great for that weekend camping trip, or maybe the New Year's Eve with friends kind of thing,
right.
But it's not a very long-term sustainable strategy. Let's just be honest about that. And eventually, but I'm with you. If you're already dehydrated, which you are because you were drinking all night, and you wake up and you start pounding Bloody Marys, which I do love a good Bloody Mary or good michelada or whatever, or even just a Miller Lite, whatever you want to drink for your breakfast. It can have a cascading effect. So I would still recommend with your hair of the dog, drinking a lot of water with it, eating some food, and just getting back on that track. Maybe even some ibuprofen and a omeprazole, kind of getting you back on track, just kind of get there. But, hair of the dog, as long as I'm not like super nauseous, those kind of symptoms, and I'm just kind of in that headache, foggy brain kind of mode on, kind of the lower end of my hierarchy there. Hair of the dog is absolutely works pretty well. Again, just you got to kind of be a little bit more cognizant of how your day's going to go, because you're really setting a standard and you're on a path at that point.
Exactly. And just a side note, when Will is saying omeprazole, the brand name for that's Prilosec. I take it daily anyways. I take a small dose of it daily because I have GERD from childhood. It's just a kind of a genetic thing for me. I don't know what impact it's having on helping my hangovers or helping me not to get drunk or whatever, but I love this stuff because I don't get heartburn anymore. You mentioned Zofran earlier. You can buy over-the-counter Nazine, I believe it's what, or Nazim or whatever. My wife buys that stuff for use just whenever, we have it laying around for when the kids feel nauseous or whatever. But yeah, I never thought to take it as a way to deal with the nausea that comes from being hungover. I hate the way this stuff tastes, so I just avoid it anyways. But my wife swears by it, and that when she's feeling nauseous, she can pop one or two of those things, and it just takes it away. So maybe give that a shot. It's not very expensive. The final, or one of the final things that I have on my list is to engage in an activity that you enjoy in, and this is something that just kind of came to me. I play the guitar, I write songs, it's just something I love doing. Usually when I have, 10 to 15 free minutes, I've got a guitar on my lap. So obviously I'd wake up, I might not feel great, but I'll grab my guitar and start playing. And there's something about it that maybe it like distracts me from the shitty feeling of having the hangover. I don't know, but just sitting there kind of fiddling around on my guitar helps me to feel really good. Another thing that I do is play Call of Duty. It's the only video game I'm really into at this point. And unless the hangover is so bad that the first person movement just amplifies my nausea, usually, again, it distracts me from the feeling, and I'm able to kind of engage in this thing, talk with my brother or some friends who are also playing, usually commiserating about the hangovers that we've got. But that also helps me out quite a bit. Are there activities that you engage in that when you do them, it kind of gets your mind off of your hangover?
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a funk, having pleasant distractions, not annoying distractions like the kids yelling in your ear, but like pleasant distractions, like you said, playing a video game, watching a movie, guitar is great, watching whatever sport is on and rooting for your favorite sports team is great. Anything that can kind of like put you in a space where you're not thinking about your active symptoms is always a good thing. Distraction, when you feel bad is a pretty solid method of, redirecting your energy to something more enjoyable. Maybe even waking up and brewing a beer is an enjoyable activity that can kind of like get you through your hangover. I like brewing beer in the morning, and so I can say that I've probably brewed quite a few beers with a slight hangover, and it seems to work out okay. As long as you're not exercising demons actively, you can get through a brew day without too many problems.
Yeah, and on that note, also recording podcasts with a hangover. I would contend that more than half of the podcast episodes that all of you are listening to have been done with co-hosts and a host who have some level of a hangover, and yet we still do it. And by the time we're done with the episode, recording it, typically I'm feeling great. I'm ready to go fill up my coffee cup and get to my day. So again, engaging in these activities, productive activities that kind of get your mind off of the awful feeling of the hangover. For me, at least, it's helpful. And I think we'd be remiss not to point out, obviously, exercise, getting out, going for a jog, a bike ride, a run, swimming some laps in a pool, whatever it might be for you. That, again, in the same way that I like to go out when I'm already feeling a bit tipsy and taking those walks or whatever it might be, getting some exercise, is horrible as I might feel, and as much as my body might be telling me to stay in bed, getting up and doing something active always helps. It's never not helped for me. And the more vigorous that exercise, I'm not going to hit it hard. I'm not going to be running any marathons or anything, but if I go to the gym and just get on the elliptical and watch a Netflix show, something like that, it always makes me feel better. So, again, that's just a part of having a good, healthy regime. So in my opinion, hangovers aren't anything to judge anybody about. You go do you. You've got one life to live. Enjoy it. Be responsible, be safe, and do these things that are healthy so that when you tie one on, when you make the decision to go a little bit further than you might normally, you have a good palette of things to choose from to help you deal with it.
Exactly. And, talk about doing exercise. I think, especially in the summer, like getting up, putting in your earbuds, turn on some music that you enjoy, and mowing the yard is a great way to deal with it, because then your kids aren't able to like kind of pester you while you're not feeling great. And you can kind of go out there and be in your zone and mow the yard. And there's something therapeutic about making grass go down in, lines and stuff like that can be kind of therapeutic and simple when you're not feeling maybe quite yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the truth of the matter is hangovers suck, but what gets us to those hangovers is usually, kind of fun, and we're having a good time. So if you're going to take the bad with the good, you're going to kind of have to do that. Hopefully the stuff we talked about today might give you some ideas for ways that you might better be able to deal with those hangovers or even avoid them in the first place. Alrighty, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, The Brülosophy Show, where host Martin Keene covers a bunch of fascinating topics in the world of brewing and beer. And remember to head over to brülosophy.com to stay current on everything we're up to. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go